laboratories and check stations out in space, fairly light armor is sufficient, as we root ourselves well away from the ecliptic and so miss all the heavy stuff. So badly as I hate to see her go there, the old tub is bound for the junkyard." A few more flights of stairs brought them to the upper band of dirigible projectors, which encircled the hull outside the passengers' quarters, some 60 feet below the prow. They were heavy, searchlight-like affairs, mounted upon massive universal bearings, free to turn in any direction, and each having its converter nestling inside its prodigious field of force. Stevens explained that these projectors were used in turning the vessel and in dodging meteorites when necessary, and they went on through another almost invisible door into a hall and took an elevator down to the main corridor. "Well, you've seen it, Miss Newton," Stevens said regretfully, as he led her toward the captain's office. "The lower half is full of heavy stuff, accumulators, machinery, driving projectors, and such junk, so that the center of gravity is below the center of action of the driving projectors. That makes stable flight possible. It's all more or less like what we've just seen, and I don't suppose you want to miss the dance. Anyway, a lot of people want to dance with you." "Wouldn't you just as soon show me through the lower half as dance?" "Rather, lots." "So would I. I can dance any time. I want to see everything. Let's go." Down they went, past battery after battery of accumulators, climbing over and around the ever-increasing number of huge steel girders and bracers, through mazes of heavily insulated wiring and conduits, past mass after mass of automatic machinery which Stevens explained to his eager listener. They inspected one of the great driving projectors, which, built rigidly parallel to the axis of the ship and held immovably in place by enormous trusses of steel, revealed neither to the eye nor to the ear any sign of the terrific force it was exerting. Still lower they went, until the girl had been shown everything, even down to the bottom ultralights and stern braces. "Tired?" Stevens asked, as the inspection was completed. "Not very. It's been quite a climb, but I've had a wonderful time." "So have I," he declared positively. "I know what. We'll crawl up into one of these stern lifeboats and make us a cup of coffee before we climb back. With me?" "Way ahead of you." Nadia accepted the invitation enthusiastically, and they made their way to the nearest of the miniature space cruisers. Here, although no emergency had been encountered in all the 4 years of the vessel's life, they found everything in readiness, and the two soon had prepared and eaten a hearty luncheon. "Well, I can't think of any more excuses for monopolizing you, Miss Newton, so I suppose I'll have to take you back. Believe me, I've enjoyed this more than you can realize. I've—" He broke off and listened, every nerve taut. "What was that?" he exclaimed. "What was what? I didn't hear anything." "Something screwy somewhere. I felt a vibration, and anything that'd make this mountain of steel even quiver must have given us one gosh-awful nudge. There's another." The girl, painfully tense, felt only a barely perceptible tremor, but the computer, knowing far better than she the inconceivable strength and mass of that enormous structure of solidly braced hardened steel, sprang into action. Leaping to the small dirigible lookout plate, he turned on the power and swung it upward. "Great suffering snakes!" he ejaculated, then stood mute, for the plate revealed a terrible sight. The entire nose of the gigantic craft had been sheared off in 2 immense slices, as though clipped off by a gigantic sword, and even as they stared, fascinated at the sight, the severed slices were drifting slowly away. Swinging the view along the plane of the cleavage, Stevens made out a relatively tiny ball of metal, only 50 feet or so in diameter, at a distance of perhaps a mile. From this ball there shot a blinding plane of light, and the Arcturus fell apart at the midsection, the lower half separating clean from the upper portion, which held the passengers. Leaving the upper half intact, The attacker began slicing the lower, driving half into thin, disc-shaped sections. As that incandescent plane of destruction made its first flashing cut through the body of the Arcturus, accompanied by an additional pyrotechnic display of severed and short-circuited high-tension leads, Stevens and Nadia suddenly found themselves floating weightless in the air of the room. Still gripping the controls of the lookout plate, Stevens caught the white-faced girl with one hand, drew her down beside him, and held her motionless, while his keen mind flashed over all the possibilities of the situation and planned his course of action. "They're apparently slicing us pretty evenly, and by the looks of things, one cut is coming right about here," he explained rapidly, as he found a flashlight and drew his companion through the door and along a narrow passage. Soon he opened another door and led her into a tiny compartment, so low that they could not stand upright, a mere cubicle of steel. Carefully closing the door, he fingered dials upon each of the walls of the cell, then folded himself up into a comfortable position, instructing Nadia to do the same, and snapped off the light. "Please, leave it on," the shaken girl asked. "It's so ghastly." "We'd better save it, Nadia," he advised, pressing her arm reassuringly. "It's the only light we've got, and we may need it worse later on. Its life is limited, you know." "Later on? Do you think we'll need anything? Later on?" "Sure. Of course, they may get us, Nadia, but this little tertiary air brake is a mighty small target for them to hit. And if they miss us, as I think they will, there's a larger room opening off each wall of this one, at least one of which will certainly be left intact. From any one of those rooms we can reach a lifeboat. Of course, it's a little too much to expect that any one of the lifeboats will be left whole, but they're bulkheaded too, you know, so that we can be sure of finding something able to navigate, providing we can make our getaway. Believe me, Ace, I'm sure glad we're aboard the old Arcturus right now with all her safety devices, instead of on one of the modern liners. We'd be sunk right." "I felt sunk enough for a minute. I'm feeling better now, though, since you are taking it so calmly." "Sure, why not? A man's not dead until his heart stops beating, you know. Our turn'll come next, when they let up a little." "But suppose they change the width of their slices and hit this cubby, small as it is?" "It'd be just too bad," he shrugged. "In that case, we'd never know what hit us, so it's no good worrying about it. But say, we might do something at that, if they didn't hit us square. I can move fairly fast, and might be able to get a door open before the loss of pressure seals it. We'll light the flash. Here, you hold it, so that I can have both hands free. Put both arms around me, just under the arms, and stick to me like a porous plaster, because if I have to move at all, I'll have to jump like chain lightning. Shine the beam right over there, so it'll reflect and light up all the dials at once. There, hold on tight. Here they come." As he spoke, a jarring shudder shook one side of their hiding place. Then, a moment later, the phenomenon was repeated, but with much less force, upon the other side. Stevens sighed with relief, took the light, and extinguished it. "Missed us clean," he exulted. "Now, if they don't find us, we're all set." "How can they possibly find us? I seem to be always worried about the wrong things, but I should think that their finding us would be the least of our troubles." "Don't judge their vision system by ours. They've got everything, apparently. However, their apparatus may not be delicate enough to spot us in a space this small when their projectors flash through it, as they probably will. Then, too, there's a couple of other big items in our favor. Nobody else is in the entire lower half, since all this machinery down here is either automatic or else controlled from up above, so they won't be expecting to see anybody when they get down this far, and we aren't at all conspicuous. We're both dressed in gray. Your clothes in particular are almost exactly the color of this armor plate, so altogether we stand a good chance of being missed." "What shall we do now?" "Nothing whatever. Wish we could sleep for a couple of hours, But of course there's no hope of that. Stretch out here, like that.